The red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror, painting the rain-streaked windshield in sharp strokes of neon. Officer Declan Mercer thought it was just another routine shakedown. He already had a small bag of crystal methamphetamine hidden in his palm, ready to slip it into the center console of the sleek Mercedes. What he didn't know was that the black woman sitting calmly behind the wheel was no ordinary civilian. She was Imani Whitmore, the newly appointed regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and her vehicle was already recording his every move from 6 concealed camera angles. Philadelphia seemed to weep beneath a cold, relentless rain. The streets of the 12th District were slick with oil and runoff, reflecting the sickly yellow glow of the street lamps like a shattered mirror. Inside Patrol Car 44, Detective Declan Mercer drummed his thick fingers against the steering wheel. He had worn the badge for 15 years, long enough for the brass to lose its shine and for his morals to erode almost completely. Mercer was heavyset with a square jaw and eyes that always seemed to be calculating the exact leverage he had over anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path. In the passenger seat, his partner, Officer Elias Boone, nervously picked at the peeling edge of his coffee cup. Boone was fresh out of the academy, still possessing the naive glow of a man who believed the uniform stood for absolute justice. Mercer hated that glow. He had spent months trying to extinguish it, teaching Boone the real rules of the street, the rules that declared men like them the undisputed kings of the concrete, and everyone else was just a peasant begging for mercy. "Slow night, Declan," Boone muttered, wiping condensation from his side of the windshield. "Nights are only as slow as you let them be, kid," Mercer replied, his voice a low gravel rasp. He scanned the traffic rolling down Broad Street. His eyes were trained to look for weakness, for targets. He didn't look for crime. He looked for opportunity. Mercer had a system. He targeted out-of-state plates, high-end cars driven by people from minority communities, especially those he assumed would be too frightened to fight back or too mistrustful of the system to believe internal affairs would take them seriously. He called it taxing. A little cash here, a seized vehicle there, and when he needed to boost his arrest numbers to keep the captain off his back, a mysterious small bag of narcotics would suddenly appear during a search. The old-timers called it the dropsy. Mercer was a master of it. Ahead of them, a black Mercedes-Benz G-Class sport utility vehicle glided through the intersection. It was pristine, the paint job swallowing the city lights. Its windows were tinted dark, but as it passed beneath a high-pressure sodium street lamp, Mercer caught a glimpse of the driver through the slightly cracked driver's side window, a black woman in her late 40s. Mercer's lips curled into a faint, predatory smile. "Look at this," he sneered, nodding toward the sport utility vehicle. "Probably hauling something north or driving a car that does not belong to her." "Let's see what she's holding," Mercer said. "Declan, they are not speeding. The taillights are working." "We don't have probable cause," Boone replied, his voice tightening. Mercer hit the gas, the cruiser's engine roaring as it surged forward, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. "Probable cause is whatever I write in the report, Elias," Mercer said. She drifted over the yellow line. "I saw it, and you saw it." Boone swallowed hard and looked down at his lap. "Right." She drifted. Mercer flicked the switch. The sirens wailed, a sharp, piercing shriek that cut through the heavy rhythm of the rain, and the light bar ignited. Inside the Mercedes, Imani Whitmore glanced up at her rearview mirror. The flashing lights illuminated her calm, unreadable features. Imani had spent 22 years climbing the grueling, male-dominated, politically treacherous ladder of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She had started as a field agent in the Violent Crimes Division in Chicago, worked her way through counterterrorism in Washington, District of Columbia, and had recently been appointed as the director of the Eastern Regional Division. She was a woman who had stared down cartel bosses, corrupt politicians, and domestic terrorists. She did not panic at the sight of a local police cruiser. Imani smoothly engaged her turn signal and pulled the heavy sport utility vehicle over to the shoulder, bringing it to a gentle halt under the flickering light of a broken neon billboard. She shifted the car into park and laid both hands flat on the steering wheel, right at 10 and 2. Her posture was relaxed, but commanding. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer over a crisp white blouse. In her glove compartment was her Federal Bureau of Investigation badge, a loaded Glock 19, and a secure federal communication device. But Amani was also keenly aware of the statistics. She knew what happened on dark, rainy roads. She knew the reality of the world she lived in, independent of the powerful badge shielded in her glove box. Reaching up with one finger, she pressed a small, discreet button on her rearview mirror. A tiny blue indicator light flickered to life. The vehicle, specially modified by the Bureau's technical division, began silently recording high-definition audio and video from the dash, the rear, the cabin, and the side mirrors. Every word, every movement, would be instantly encrypted and uploaded to a secure federal server. She watched in the side mirror as a burly officer stepped out of the cruiser, adjusting his utility belt. He didn't unholster his weapon, but his hand rested casually on the grip. The swagger in his walk told Amani everything she needed to know about him before he even opened his mouth. This was a man used to terrorizing people in the dark. "Let's see what you want, officer," Amani whispered to herself, her voice smooth and chillingly calm. Mercer approached the driver's side of the Mercedes, his flashlight gripped tightly in his left hand. He shined the blinding beam directly into the side mirror, a classic intimidation tactic designed to blind and disorient the driver. Boone flanked him on the passenger side, standing a few feet back, his hand resting nervously on his radio. Mercer tapped his heavy metal flashlight against the tempered glass of the driver's window. Tap, tap, tap. A demand, not a request. Amani pressed the button to roll the window down. The cold, damp air flooded the pristine, leather-scented cabin of the sport utility vehicle. She did not squint or turn her face away from the blinding light. She looked straight ahead, her hands remaining perfectly still on the wheel. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Mercer demanded, his tone clipped and aggressive. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't state the reason for the stop. "Good evening, officer," Amani said, her voice even, modulated, devoid of any tremble or fear. "Before I reach for my documents, I would like to know why I was pulled over." Mercer lowered the flashlight slightly, angling it so it illuminated Amani's face. He analyzed her. She wasn't dressed like a street dealer, but in Mercer's warped worldview, that just meant she was higher up the food chain. Or a lawyer. He hated lawyers, but he loved breaking them even more. "You failed to maintain your lane," Mercer lied smoothly. "You were drifting and swerving. It smells like you might be under the influence. Now hand over the documents before I pull you out of this vehicle for refusing to cooperate," Mercer added. Amani's eyes flicked to the nameplate on his chest. "I haven't consumed any alcohol, Officer Mercer," she replied politely. "I assure you, I have maintained my lane perfectly," Amani replied. "My license is inside my wallet, and my wallet is in the purse on the passenger seat. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to slowly reach for my purse first." "Is that acceptable?" Mercer sneered. She was talking to him like he was a child. He hated women who talked like that. Just get it. No sudden moves. Amani slowly moved her right hand, grasping the leather purse on the passenger seat. She retrieved her Pennsylvania driver's license, a standard issue, though flagged in the federal database as a protected identity, and handed it through the window. She deliberately kept the glove box closed for now. Mercer snatched the card. He shined his light on it. Amani Whitmore. No red flags immediately jumped out, but he wasn't looking at a database, just the plastic. "Whose car is this, Amani?" Mercer asked, intentionally using her first name to demean her. "A little out of your price range, isn't it? What do you do for a living?" "The vehicle belongs to my employer," Amani answered calmly. "I work for the federal government." Mercer let out a short, barking laugh. "The government, right? What do you do? Sort mail at the post office?" "Listen to me, Amani. I'm going to run this license. You sit tight and keep your hands where my partner can see them. If you move, Boone over there is going to have a problem." Amani turned her head slightly to look at the young officer standing by the passenger window. Boone looked visibly uncomfortable, his eyes darting away when she made eye contact. He is new, she realized instantly. He is terrified of his training officer, and he is about to become an accessory to whatever this man intends to do. Mercer marched back to the cruiser. He slid into the driver's seat, wiping rain from his forehead. "What's the deal?" Boone asked over the radio from outside. "She's got an attitude," Mercer grunted into his shoulder microphone. He typed her name and the sport utility vehicle's license plate into the mobile data terminal. The system paused. A small spinning wheel appeared on the screen. Usually the return was instantaneous. After a brief delay, a strange prompt appeared. Restricted tag. Do not detain. Contact dispatch for verification. Mercer frowned and tapped the screen with a thick finger. "Stupid system is glitching again," he muttered to himself. He had seen restricted tags before, usually on undercover vice cars or high-level city officials, but the system didn't specifically say Federal Bureau of Investigation Director. To Mercer, a glitch meant an unregistered ghost car, the kind used by high-end cartels to bypass automated license plate readers. In his twisted logic, this was the jackpot. If this was cartel money, there would be a lot of cash in that car, cash he could seize under civil asset forfeiture, keeping a heavy slice for himself. "She is carrying something illegal," Mercer announced over the radio to Boone. "The system cannot even clear the plates. It is a ghost car. We're doing a search." Boone's voice came back strained. "Declan, we need a warrant or probable cause for a full toss. I smell marijuana, Elias. That is all the probable cause the courts need," Mercer replied, killing the radio. He reached into his tactical vest. Deep in the lining of his left pocket, he kept his insurance policy, a small sealed bag of crystal methamphetamine he had taken from a street offender sometime earlier and never logged into evidence. He palmed it expertly, hiding it in the meaty grip of his left hand. He stepped back out into the rain and approached the driver's window again. "Step out of the vehicle, Imani," Mercer commanded, his hand resting heavily on his holster. "Now." Imani looked at him. She saw the shift in his posture, the artificial aggression manufactured to justify force. "Officer Mercer, I do not consent to any searches. I have provided my identification. Am I under arrest, or am I free to go?" "You are stepping out of the car right now," Mercer snarled, pulling his flashlight up. "I smell marijuana coming from the vehicle. That gives me probable cause to search. Step out, or I will break the window and remove you myself." Imani did not flinch. Her breathing remained slow and controlled. She was a woman who had negotiated hostage situations with desperate men holding dangerous devices. A corrupt street cop with a god complex was merely a nuisance, but he was a dangerous nuisance, and she wanted him exposed entirely and unequivocally. If she flashed her badge now, he would back down, apologize, and go back to terrorizing people who didn't have a badge of their own. Nope, Imani Whitmore was going to let him reveal exactly who he was. She would give him every opportunity to stop, and she would document every choice he made when he refused. "I am stepping out of the vehicle," Imani said clearly, ensuring the microphones picked up her exact phrasing. "I am unarmed, and I am complying with your orders under duress." She opened the heavy door and stepped out into the freezing rain. The rain immediately soaked through Imani's blazer, but she stood tall, towering over Mercer slightly in her low heels. She crossed her hands in front of her, remaining perfectly still. "Go stand by the hood of my cruiser," Mercer barked. "Boone, watch her." Imani walked back to the police car, the blue and red lights washing over her stoic face. Boone stood a few feet away, his arms crossed against the cold. He looked at her, and for a fleeting second, Imani saw a flicker of guilt in the young man's eyes. "You don't have to let him do this," Imani said softly, her voice carrying only to Boone over the sound of the rain. Boone stiffened. "Ma'am, just stay quiet and cooperate." "It'll go easier," Boone said. "You wear that uniform to protect people, Officer Boone," Imani continued, her tone conversational but piercing. "Whatever he is about to find in my car, you and I both know it isn't mine. When this reaches a courtroom, your silence will be viewed as complicity." Boone swallowed hard, looking away. "I don't know what you're talking about." Up at the Mercedes, Mercer was putting on a theatrical performance. He shined his flashlight under the seats and along the door panels, making a show of tossing the floor mats. It was sloppy. He wasn't looking for evidence. He was looking for a hiding spot for his own. He leaned heavily into the driver's side, his upper body completely inside the vehicle. With his right hand, he rummaged through the center console. With his left hand, the one hiding the small bag of methamphetamine, he smoothly slipped the drugs between the passenger seat and the leather armrest. He left it just visible enough to be discovered upon a second glance. Mercer backed out of the car, wiping his hands together as if disgusted.
Well,
Mercer called out, his voice dripping with triumphant malice. He walked over to the passenger side, opened the door, and shined his light directly onto the small bag. "What do we have here?" He reached in with a gloved hand and pulled out the small bag of crystal methamphetamine, holding it up like a trophy in the rain. Boone flinched, his eyes widening. He had been riding with Mercer long enough to know the man was corrupt. He knew Mercer skimmed cash and accepted bribes, but planting a felony amount of narcotics on a woman who looked like an accountant crossed a line Boone had never seen him cross so openly. "Looks like we found the reason you were swerving, Amani," Mercer sneered, walking back toward her. He dangled the small bag in front of her face. "Looks like crystal methamphetamine. A trafficking amount, too. You're looking at mandatory minimums and state prison." Amani looked at the small bag, then looked directly into Mercer's eyes. There was no fear, no outrage, no desperate pleas of innocence. Her utter lack of panic unsettled Mercer for a microscopic fraction of a second before his ego crushed the doubt. "That does not belong to me," Amani stated, her voice projecting clearly for the microphones she knew were recording everything from the cruiser's dash cam as well as her own vehicle's camera array. "You placed that inside my vehicle, Officer Mercer." "Oh, so I'm a dirty cop now." Mercer laughed, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Amani complied. She turned around, presenting her wrists. The cold steel ratcheted tightly around her wrists. Mercer intentionally clamped them down a notch too tight, trying to elicit a reaction. Imani gave him nothing. "You have the right to remain silent," Mercer recited, his breath hot and smelling of stale coffee against her neck. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As he read the Miranda rights, Boone walked forward. "Declan," Boone hissed as he leaned closer. "What are we doing? She doesn't fit the profile. She's clean. The car is spotless." "Shut up, Elias," Mercer snapped, guiding Amani roughly toward the back seat of the cruiser. "She is a courier. They dress people like her well to fool rookies like you," Mercer said. "We are taking her in. Call for a tow truck to impound the Mercedes. We are tearing that vehicle apart at the impound yard." Imani was forced into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the police cruiser. The smell of vomit, cheap disinfectant, and despair permeated the air. The rain hammered against the roof. Through the wire mesh divider, she watched Mercer and Boone argue in hushed, angry tones outside. She felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. It wasn't the first time she had been in the back of a police car, but it was the first time she was entirely in control of the officers who put her there. She adjusted her wrists slightly. She felt the pinch of the metal as Mercer climbed into the driver's seat, slamming the door. Boone got in a moment later, staring blankly out the windshield. "You're making a colossal mistake, Officer Mercer," Amani said from the darkness of the back seat. Mercer looked at her through the rearview mirror, flashing a yellow, crooked grin. "The only mistake here was crossing my path, sweetheart. I own this city. Before long, you'll be begging me for a plea deal just to see the sun again." He threw the cruiser into drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving the reinforced Mercedes sitting alone in the rain. Its hidden cameras continued to record silently, while the encrypted data stream moved through a secure federal network and landed on a heavily guarded server in Quantico, Virginia. The drive to the district precinct felt longer than it was. Mercer drove aggressively, hitting potholes intentionally to bounce his prisoner around the back. Amani braced her knees against the partition, riding out the turbulence with silent dignity. When they arrived at the precinct, a severe concrete structure that looked like a forgotten bunker, Mercer pulled her out of the car. He parroted her through the bullpen, wanting the other night shift cops to see his catch. Phones rang, keyboards clattered, and the air was thick with the smell of cheap takeout and exhaustion. Captain Everett Sloan was standing by the booking desk, nursing a mug of tea. He was an older man nearing retirement, wearing a tired expression that suggested he had seen too much corruption and lacked the energy to fight it anymore. "What do we have?" Captain Sloan asked, looking Amani up and down. His seasoned eyes immediately registered the mismatch, the tailored clothes, the defiant posture, and the complete absence of the panic he expected from a drug suspect. "Traffic stop," Mercer announced loudly, slapping the small bag of methamphetamine down on the booking counter. The driver was swerving. I smelled marijuana, searched the vehicle, and found 2 ounces of crystal methamphetamine inside the center console. "She's a high-level mule, Captain." Sloan picked up the small bag, then looked at Amani. "Name?" "I've already provided my driver's license to Officer Mercer," Amani said calmly. "I suggest you examine it." Mercer tossed her purse onto the counter and fished out the identification card, handing it to the captain. Sloan looked at the license. "Amani Whitmore," Sloan read. He looked at her. "You have a phone call, Miss Whitmore. I suggest you use it to call a very good lawyer." "I do not need a lawyer, Captain Sloan," Amani said, reading his name tag. "But I would like my handcuffs removed, and I would like you to make a phone call on my behalf." Mercer snorted loudly. "Listen to her," Mercer scoffed. "She thinks she is checking into a luxury hotel." Amani ignored him entirely. She locked eyes with the captain. Her voice dropped an octave, carrying the weight of unquestionable authority. "Captain Sloan, my name is Amani Whitmore," she said. "I am the regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The vehicle that Officer Mercer unlawfully stopped and searched is federal property. The narcotics he claims to have found were planted by his own hand, an act captured on 6 different high-definition federal surveillance cameras hidden within my vehicle." The bullpen went dead silent. The clatter of keyboards stopped. The ringing phone seemed to fade into the background. Every eye in the room turned toward the booking desk. Mercer froze. The arrogant smirk melted off his face, replaced by a sudden, sickening pallor. He looked at Boone, who looked like he was about to vomit on his own boots. Sloan stared at Amani, the tea mug, trembling slightly in his hand. He looked down at the driver's license again, then back at her. "Director Whitmore." "Yes, Captain," Amani said, her eyes shifting to Mercer, pinning him like an insect to a corkboard. "I am formally placing Detective Declan Mercer under federal arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, evidence tampering, and possession of a Schedule II narcotic with intent to distribute." She took a slow, deep breath, relishing the absolute terror blossoming in Mercer's eyes. "Now," Amani said, her voice echoing in the silent precinct, "take these cuffs off me." For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound in the 12th District precinct was the relentless drumming of the Philadelphia rain against the barred windows. Captain Sloan stared at Amani Whitmore, his breath hitching in his throat. He looked down at the Pennsylvania driver's license, resting on the scratched surface of the booking desk, then up at the woman standing before him, with the icy composure of someone entirely certain of her authority. "I need to verify this," Sloan stammered, his hand reaching for the precinct's landline. "Verify it however you see fit, Captain," Amani replied, extending her restrained hand slightly. "But first, remove these cuffs. You are currently detaining a federal director under false pretenses. The longer these cuffs remain on my wrists, the more serious the consequences become for everyone responsible." Sloan swallowed hard. He dug into his pocket, his hand visibly shaking, and pulled out his universal handcuff key. "Captain, wait!" Mercer yelled, panic finally piercing through his bravado. His face was flushed, a blotchy red creeping up his thick neck. "She's lying. Look at her. She's playing you, Sloan. It's a fake identification card. Couriers use high-end fakes all the time. I found the crystal in her console. I saw her swerving," Mercer insisted. Sloan hesitated, the key inches from the keyhole. "Do it, Captain," Amani said with firm authority. It wasn't a request. It was an absolute directive from a woman used to bending bureaucracies to her will. With a metallic click, the cuffs fell away. Imani calmly brought her hands forward, rubbing her wrists where the steel had bitten into her skin. She reached out, grabbed her purse from the counter, and unzipped the side pocket. She bypassed the civilian smartphone and withdrew a heavy matte black satellite phone, a device issued strictly to top-tier federal executives. She dialed a single digit and pressed send. "Whitmore. Code Blue. Philadelphia, 12th District Precinct," she said crisply into the receiver. "Secure the perimeter. Secure my vehicle on Broad Street. Bring the technical package." She ended the call and placed the heavy phone back on the counter. Mercer let out a desperate, scoffing laugh, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. "Code Blue. What is this supposed to be, a movie? You think you can just waltz in here, pretend to be a federal agent, and scare us? I've been on the job 15 years, lady. You're going to a holding cell." Imani turned to face him fully. "Detective Mercer, before my team arrives and takes control of this investigation, I am giving you one opportunity. You are a sworn officer of the law. You made an arrest. Captain Sloan is here. Your partner, Officer Boone, is here, and half the night shift can hear us." She gestured broadly to the silent, staring detectives and patrol cops in the bullpen. "Tell them exactly what happened," Imani said, her voice deceptively gentle. "Put your official narrative on the verbal record right now. How did the stop go? Where did you find the drugs?" Boone, standing near the precinct doors, looked like he was vibrating with sheer terror. "Declan, don't," he whispered. "Shut up, Elias," Mercer snapped, stepping forward, thrusting his chest out to reclaim his lost authority. He pointed a thick, calloused finger at Imani. "I'll tell you exactly what happened, and it's going in the report. I observed the suspect's black Mercedes sport utility vehicle crossing the double yellow line on Broad Street. I initiated a lawful traffic stop. Upon approaching the vehicle, I detected the strong odor of burnt marijuana, giving me probable cause for a search." Mercer was pacing now, performing for his peers, trying to rally the thin blue line to his defense. "I ordered the suspect out of the vehicle. She was uncooperative, belligerent, and exhibited signs of extreme nervousness. I conducted a lawful search of the vehicle's interior. Tucked deep inside the center console, beneath a tray, I discovered a small, clear plastic bag containing a white, crystalline substance, which I immediately recognized as methamphetamine. 2 ounces, a trafficking amount," Mercer declared. He stopped and crossed his arms, glaring at Imani with a mixture of hatred and desperate defiance. "That's the truth. That's the sworn account of a decorated detective, and it's going to put you behind bars." Imani listened to the entire fabrication without blinking. A faint, almost pitying smile touched the corners of her mouth. "Thank you, Declan," she said softly. The heavy, reinforced doors of the precinct suddenly swung open. A coordinated team of men and women wearing tactical gear and navy blue windbreakers emblazoned with the words Federal Bureau of Investigation surged into the bullpen. There were at least a dozen of them moving with precision and disciplined efficiency. They immediately took strategic positions, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. The precinct officers, stunned into silence, slowly moved their hands away from their duty belts. A tall, sharp-featured man in a tailored suit walked through the tactical team carrying a reinforced federal tablet. This was Special Agent Adrian Whitaker, Imani's trusted deputy. "Director Whitmore," Whitaker said, stopping a few feet from her. He glared at Mercer with naked disgust. "The vehicle is secured," Whitaker reported. "A secondary team is on the way with the flatbed, and the data stream has been fully downloaded and decrypted. Excellent. Let's show Captain Sloan and his officers exactly what happened," Imani said. She turned to a large flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall behind the booking desk, usually used to display shift schedules and active warrants. Agent Whitaker cast the interior cabin feed to that screen. Whitaker tapped the screen of his tablet. The monitor behind the desk blinked, then flared to life. The high-definition video, enhanced for low-light conditions, was crystal clear. It showed the interior of Imani's Mercedes from a camera cleverly concealed within the rearview mirror housing. The recording data matched the traffic stop precisely. The entire precinct watched in dead silence. On the screen, Amani stepped out of the vehicle into the rain. Then, the rain-soaked figure of Detective Declan Mercer leaned into the frame. The audio was pristine, picking up his heavy breathing and the rustle of his tactical vest. They watched as Mercer rummaged loudly in the center console with his right hand. Then the camera caught it. The undeniable damning detail. His left hand came up from his pocket. Pinched between his thumb and forefinger was the bag of crystal methamphetamine. He smoothly slipped it between the passenger seat and the leather armrest, leaving it slightly exposed. He backed out of the frame. Moments later, the audio picked up his theatrical, triumphant voice. "Well, well, well. What do we have here?" Mercer said in the recording. The video replayed the moment, making the evidence impossible to deny. Captain Sloan let out a long, ragged exhale, sinking into his chair behind the desk. He looked at Mercer as if the man had just mutated into a monster before his eyes. Mercer stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like someone struggling for air. The arrogant bluster had entirely evaporated, replaced by a hollow, paralyzing dread. He looked at the screen, then at the heavily armed federal agents surrounding him, and finally at Amani. "You," Mercer choked out, his voice a barely audible rasp. "You set me up," Mercer whispered. "I didn't set you up, Detective," Amani replied, her tone ringing with absolute crushing finality. "I merely gave you the opportunity to show who you were. Every choice that brought you here was your own. Agent Whitaker, arrest him." Whitaker stepped forward, effortlessly spinning the heavyset detective around and positioning his feet apart. The sharp metallic ratcheting of federal handcuffs echoed loudly in the silent room. The precinct's interrogation room was a sterile, windowless box that smelled of stale sweat, floor wax, and decades of desperate lies. It was a room where Declan Mercer had broken the confidence of countless suspects through intimidation, coercion, and fabricated evidence. Now he sat on the wrong side of the bolted-down steel table. His badge and gun were gone. His tie had been confiscated. He looked small, deflated, a former predator suddenly realizing he was trapped at the bottom of the food chain. Amani Whitmore walked into the room, followed closely by Agent Whitaker. She carried a manila folder, which she tossed carelessly onto the table. It landed with a heavy, ominous thud. She pulled out the metal chair opposite Mercer and sat down, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "Let's skip the formalities, Declan," Amani began, her voice calm and businesslike. "You are facing a litany of federal charges. Deprivation of rights under color of law carries a potential sentence of up to 10 years. Evidence tampering can add as many as 20 more. Possession of a Schedule II narcotic with intent to distribute also carries a mandatory minimum, because planting drugs is, in effect, distributing them. If you insist on taking this to trial, I will personally ensure you spend decades in a maximum security federal penitentiary, carrying the consequences of what you did to innocent people." Mercer swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He stared at his handcuffed wrists resting on the table. "I want a lawyer." "You are entitled to one," Amani said smoothly. "But before you call an attorney to negotiate a plea you will never get, I want you to understand exactly why I was driving down Broad Street that night." Mercer looked up, his eyes bloodshot and confused. "What?" Mercer asked. "Did you honestly think a regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation was out on a late-night drive through the 12th District?" Amani leaned forward slightly, the intensity in her eyes pinning him to his seat. "Do you think I just happened to be in your hunting ground, Declan?" Amani asked. Mercer's breath hitched. A cold, terrifying realization began to dawn on him. Months earlier, Amani continued as she opened the manila folder and spread out a series of high-resolution surveillance photographs. "You initiated a traffic stop on a man named Caleb Raines, known on the street as Ghost," she said. "You pulled him over on Lehigh Avenue. You claimed you smelled marijuana. You searched his trunk and found $85,000 in shrink-wrapped cash." Mercer's face turned the color of old ash. "You did not log that cash into evidence," Amani said, tapping a photograph of Mercer's cruiser parked in a dark alley. You seized it under the guise of civil forfeiture, but the paperwork never made it to the district attorney. The money just vanished, and Caleb Raines went to jail on a bogus weapons charge you manufactured to keep him quiet. Raines is a criminal, Mercer hissed defensively, his old instincts flaring up. He's a mid-level distributor for the Kensington Avenue crew. That money came from the poison he pushed into the community. Caleb Raines is a confidential federal informant, Amani corrected him sharply. He has been working directly within my division for well over a year, feeding us intelligence on a massive cartel money laundering operation operating through Philadelphia's real estate market. The $85,000 you stole was federal bait money, Declan, she added. We recorded the serial numbers of every single bill. Mercer squeezed his eyes shut, a soft groan escaping his lips. He was completely out of his depth. He hadn't just shaken down a street dealer. He had robbed the federal government and derailed a major cartel investigation. Now, here is where your situation moves from catastrophic to almost hopeless, Amani said, her voice dropping into a low, controlled register. We traced that bait money. You didn't keep it all, did you? You're a street-level earner, Declan. A tax collector, and tax collectors always send part of their earnings upward. She slid a new photograph across the table. It showed Mercer sitting in a booth at an upscale steakhouse in Center City. Sitting across from him, holding a thick manila envelope, was a gray-haired man in a bespoke suit. That is Judge Alistair Pembroke, Amani stated. He has inexplicably dismissed 42 narcotics trafficking cases over several years, always because of procedural errors or faulty warrants. Those warrants were written by you and your specialized unit. Mercer stared at the picture of the judge, his hands trembling violently. Now, you are not the mastermind, Declan. You're just a greedy, arrogant thug with a badge, Amani said, leaning back in her chair. Judge Pembroke is the target. He is providing judicial cover for a cartel laundering operation. He is using corrupt officers like you to skim off the competition and seize unrecorded cash to fund his re-election campaigns. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights. Your partner, Officer Boone, is in the next room, Amani mentioned calmly. Agent Whitaker here had a very brief chat with him. The kid is terrified. He's young, he's broke, and he doesn't want to go to federal prison. He has already agreed to testify that you routinely carried narcotics intended for planting, that you targeted minorities for illegal searches, and that you bragged about your connections to Judge Pembroke. Boone is going to avoid the most serious charges because he was not part of the extortion ring. He was a frightened witness to your conduct. Amani closed the folder. The loud smack of the cardboard made Mercer jump. So here is your one and only lifeline, detective, she said. You are going to delay speaking with counsel long enough to complete one immediate operation. You are going to let my technical team fit you with a covert wire. During the next stage of the operation, you are going to walk into Judge Pembroke's chambers. You are going to hand him his cut of the money you collected recently, and you are going to get him on tape discussing the network. Mercer swallowed dryly. If Pembroke finds out. I'm wearing a wire. The cartel will come after me, Mercer said. They'll come after my family. If you refuse, Amani replied, her voice steady and unsympathetic. I will hold a press conference without delay. I will release the high-definition video of you planting methamphetamine in my vehicle to every news outlet in the country. Yeah. You will be the national face of police corruption. Judge Pembroke will cut you loose, disavow you, and you will face a jury that has seen you on tape committing a federal felony. When you enter prison, you will have to face the full consequences of the harm you caused with false evidence. Amani stood up, buttoning her charcoal blazer. She looked down at the broken man in the chair. You wanted to be a predator, Declan. You wanted to rule the concrete, Amani said coldly. But you forgot one fundamental rule of the jungle. No one remains untouchable forever. She turned towards the door. Agent Whitaker, give him a moment to decide. If he says no, book him into the federal holding facility and release the evidence through proper channels, she said. As Amani reached for the door handle, Mercer's voice broke the silence, choked with defeat and the bitter taste of his own ruin. Wait, Mercer said. Amani paused, not looking back. I'll wear the wire, Mercer whispered to the steel table. I'll give you Pembroke. Later, the sky over Philadelphia remained a bruised, sullen gray. Inside a nondescript Federal Bureau of Investigation safe house on the outskirts of the Navy Yard, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and ozone from the electronic surveillance gear. Detective Declan Mercer sat rigidly in a metal folding chair, his broad shoulders hunched, staring blankly at the cinder-block wall. I was sweating through his pale blue button-down shirt. His hands, usually so steady when gripping a baton or palming fabricated evidence, trembled slightly as a federal technician adjusted the collar of his shirt. The transmitter is secure, Director, the technician said, stepping back. He had embedded a miniature microphone into the top button of Mercer's collar, with a backup wire taped flat against the detective's sternum, transmitting a continuous encrypted signal to the tactical van parked 3 blocks from the federal courthouse. Amani Whitmore stood by the window, watching the rain slick the pavement outside. She turned, her expression unreadable, and walked over to Mercer. She placed a thick manila envelope on the small table next to him. Inside was exactly $25,000 in marked federal bills, the exact amount Mercer had agreed to deliver as the judge's weekly payment. Let's review the plan, Declan, Amani said, her voice a cool, steady hum that seemed to chill the room further. You will enter Judge Pembroke's private chambers when instructed. You will hand him the envelope. You must get him to acknowledge the source of the funds. I need him to clearly acknowledge the laundering operation, the real estate limited liability companies, or the cartel connections. Vague agreements will not hold up in court. You need to make him speak openly. Mercer swallowed dryly, his eyes darting to the envelope. Pembroke isn't an idiot. He's a sitting judge. He speaks in code. If I push too hard, he's going to know something is wrong. Then you had better be a very good actor, Special Agent Adrian Whitaker interjected, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. If you walk out of that courthouse without an actionable confession, your cooperation agreement disappears. You'll be in a federal holding cell before the day is over, and the tape of you planting methamphetamine on the director will be playing across the national news. Mercer wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. He had spent his entire career operating under the assumption of invincibility, shielded by a badge and the silence of his peers. Now, stripped of his authority, he was nothing more than bait. I can do it, Mercer rasped as he picked up the envelope. Just be ready if he has security in there. We will be listening to every heartbeat, Amani replied. Do not deviate from the plan, Amani warned. Not long afterward, Mercer walked through the heavy marble columns of the county courthouse. The metal detectors were a mere formality for a known detective. He was waved through by court officers who had no idea they were allowing a live federal wire through security. He took the private elevator to the 4th floor, the domain of the senior judges. The heavy mahogany door to Judge Alistair Pembroke's chambers loomed at the end of a carpeted hallway. Mercer knocked twice, his knuckles rapping against the polished wood. Enter, a refined, aristocratic voice called out. Mercer pushed the door open. The chambers were opulent, lined with leather-bound legal volumes, smelling of expensive cigar smoke and old money. Judge Pembroke sat behind a massive oak desk. He was a man in his early 60s, with silver hair meticulously combed back, and eyes as cold and calculating as a raptor's gaze. He was casually signing a stack of legal documents, barely looking up as Mercer stepped inside and closed the door. Declan, Pembroke said smoothly, gesturing to a leather wingback chair. You're late, and you look terrible. You're sweating. It's the humidity, Your Honor, Mercer lied, sinking into the chair. He felt the wire taped to his chest, pressing against his skin like a branding iron. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out the manila envelope, tossing it onto the center of the oak desk. $25,000, Mercer said. It is the cut from the Kensington Avenue sweep, plus the excess we collected from the transit couriers. Pembroke didn't touch the envelope. He simply stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Mercer. You're usually much more discreet, Declan, Pembroke noted, his voice dropping slightly in volume. You usually do not hand me cash directly unless there's a problem, Pembroke added. What is the problem? Mercer's heart hammered against his ribs. Stick to the script, he thought, desperately. No problem, Judge. Things are just getting hot, Mercer said, leaning forward, trying to inject a note of genuine anxiety into his voice. People are talking, Mercer continued. Word is the federal agents are looking into the ghost arrest. They're looking for the $85,000 we pulled from his trunk. Pembroke's eyes narrowed. He finally reached out and pulled the envelope toward him, slipping it into a drawer. Let them look. The money was never logged. As far as the system is concerned, it doesn't exist. Ghost is sitting in a detention center on a weapons charge. He isn't talking to anyone. That's exactly the problem, Mercer pressed, feeling a terrifying adrenaline spike. If the federal agents trace that money, it leads back to the cartel, Mercer said. The cartel leadership is getting restless, Alistair. They want to know when the clean money from the North Philadelphia Real Estate Limited Liability Companies is going to clear. They don't like waiting. The silence in the room stretched to a breaking point. Pembroke stared at Mercer, his cold eyes dissecting the detective's damp brow, his rapid breathing, the slight tremor in his hands. You are exceptionally nervous today, Declan, Pembroke said softly. He stood up from his desk and slowly walked around it, coming to a stop just inches from Mercer's chair. Are you wearing a wire? Mercer froze, the blood drained from his face. What? No, Judge. Come on. Stand up, Pembroke commanded, his voice suddenly sharp as breaking glass. In the tactical van 3 blocks away, Agent Whitaker gripped the edge of the console. He suspects him. Director, we need to move. Hold, Imani commanded, her eyes locked on the audio visualizer, watching the jagged green lines of Mercer's spiking heart rate. Let it play out. Back in the chambers, Mercer slowly stood up. Pembroke reached out and patted down Mercer's waist, checking for a recording device on his belt, then patted his sides. He missed the microtransmitter woven into the shirt button and the flat microphone on his sternum. Pembroke stepped back, seemingly satisfied, but still suspicious. You listen to me, Declan. Pembroke dropped the aristocratic facade. You do not worry about the cartel or the limited liability companies, he sneered. I handle the shell companies. I launder the cash through the commercial properties. The cartel receives its cleaned money. Your only job is to keep the streets quiet, seize the competitors' shipments, and bring me my percentage. Do you understand? Mercer let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He had it. The explicit confession. I understand, Your Honor, Mercer said. Good, Pembroke said, turning his back to return to his desk. Now get out of my chambers before your paranoia infects me, Pembroke ordered. Actually, Alistair. A calm, commanding female voice echoed from the doorway. Pembroke whipped around. The heavy mahogany doors had swung silently open. Imani Whitmore stood in the threshold, flanked by Agent Whitaker and 4 Federal Bureau of Investigation tactical agents. Imani held her federal badge up in her left hand. You're going to need to clear your docket for the foreseeable future, Imani said. Judge Alistair Pembroke stared at the Federal Bureau of Investigation director, his mind violently struggling to process the sudden collapse of his empire. The color vanished from his aristocratic face, leaving him looking frail and remarkably old. What is the meaning of this? Pembroke demanded, relying on decades of judicial arrogance. You cannot simply barge into my chambers. I am a sitting judge of the Superior Court. I will have you held in contempt, Pembroke declared. You may try from a federal holding cell, Your Honor, Imani replied, stepping into the room. Her eyes swept over the opulent office with absolute disdain. Agent Whitaker, secure the desk drawer. Retrieve the marked federal funds. Whitaker moved swiftly, bypassing the stunned judge. He opened the top drawer and pulled out the manila envelope Mercer had just delivered. He opened it, comparing the top bill's serial number against a printed manifest on his tactical tablet. Match confirmed, Agent Whitaker stated. Imani looked back at Pembroke. Alistair Pembroke, Imani said. You are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and aiding narcotics trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. Given what we just recorded on Detective Mercer's wire, I highly suggest you exercise it." Two tactical agents stepped forward, taking hold of Pembroke by the arms. The judge didn't fight. His resistance had instantly drained away, replaced by the crushing weight of a ruined legacy. As the agents ratcheted the steel handcuffs around his wrists, Pembroke locked eyes with Mercer. "You miserable, treacherous rat," Pembroke hissed, his voice venomous. Mercer looked away, unable to meet the judge's gaze. I was a broken man, caught between the wrath of the cartel he had betrayed and the federal justice system he had mocked. "Get him out of here," Amani ordered. As they led the judge away, Amani turned her attention to Mercer. He was still standing by the leather wingback chair, looking like a hollow shell of the menacing figure who had pulled her over in the rain during the earlier stop. "You got what you wanted," Mercer muttered, staring at the floor. "Pembroke is finished. The cartel connection is exposed." "Do I get my deal?" Mercer asked. "You get exactly what I promised, Declan," Amani said coldly. "You will not serve 30 years in a maximum security facility. The United States Attorney will recommend a sentence of 5 years in a low-security federal camp in exchange for your continued testimony against Pembroke and the precinct's extortion ring." Mercer looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. 5 years. "That is it?" Mercer asked. "But let me be absolutely clear," Amani continued, stepping into his personal space, her voice dropping to a firm whisper. "Your badge is gone. Your pension is gone. You will never hold a position of authority over another human being for the rest of your life. When you get out, you will be a convicted felon. You will carry the record of a corrupt officer for the rest of your life." She paused, letting the reality of his new life settle over him. "Your partner, Officer Boone, submitted his resignation," Amani added. "He agreed to testify for the government. He stepped away because beneath his fear, he still had a conscience. You are cooperating only because you were caught. There is a vast difference, Declan. Take him to processing, Whitaker." As Whitaker escorted Mercer out of the chambers, Amani stood alone in the opulent office. The silence of the room was heavy, thick with the echoes of the corrupted justice that had been dealt from behind that oak desk for years. She walked over to the tall windows, looking out over the sprawling, rain-soaked city of Philadelphia. The streets looked cleaner from up here, but Amani knew the truth. Corruption was a weed with deep roots. Pulling up Mercer and Pembroke wouldn't fix the whole garden, but it was a difficult but necessary beginning. She reached into her blazer pocket, pulling out her secure satellite phone. She dialed the direct line to the Attorney General in Washington. "It's Whitmore," Amani said as the line connected. "Code Blue is complete. We have the judge, we have the corrupt officers, and we have the financial records. Send in the forensic accountants. We are dismantling this city's criminal network." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. The red and blue lights of the federal convoy were already flashing in the street below, cutting through the gray light, a signal to the city that the people who believed they were untouchable had finally been held accountable. Amani adjusted the lapels of her blazer, her posture perfect, her resolve unbroken. The hunt was never truly over, but today the man who hunted the vulnerable had finally been stopped. She turned and walked out of the chambers, leaving the door wide open behind her. The line between justice and corruption can be painfully thin, but real strength belongs to those who refuse to look away when something is wrong. Amani Whitmore's courage reminds us that authority means very little without integrity, and that no title, badge, or position places anyone above accountability. Her victory was not simply about exposing one corrupt officer or one dishonest judge. It was about protecting every person who might never have the power, evidence, or opportunity to defend themselves. This story also leaves room for a quieter truth. Fear can silence good people, as it nearly silenced Elias Boone, but one honest choice can still begin to repair the damage. Accountability does not erase the past, and forgiveness does not remove consequences. Yet people can choose to stop participating in wrongdoing, tell the truth, accept responsibility, and help prevent further harm. Living with kindness and courage is rarely the easiest path, but it is the path that allows dignity to survive. If this story stayed with you, Like the video and share it with someone who believes that courage, responsibility, and justice still matter. Subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories about ordinary choices, hidden strength, and the moment truth finally comes into the light. Leave a comment and think about this for a moment. When silence protects the wrong person, would you have the courage to speak?